Super excited to have you here. We're going to be talking about media and network quality today, and we'll kind of go over a little bit of housekeeping and some of the other sessions that are coming up. All right, so just a little bit around background on our Converged Communications Customer Hub. So the objective for this hub is to really empower you to help your organizations accelerate the enablement of our communication solutions. So by that, we mean Teams Phone and Teams devices. We'll do this via a series of these live sessions in combination with a Yammer-based community that will be moderated by our Microsoft subject matter experts. And we highly encourage you to participate in it. And it's a great way to see what other organizations are, what challenges they have, what wins they have, and it gives you a very great avenue to share. The live sessions will focus on, over the next couple of sessions, will really be providing details around Teams Phone and Teams devices. By the end of this hub, we really want you to feel set up for success and hopefully feel ready to start your own pilot or early stages of your phone deployment while staying connected with a community of individuals that are doing similar work and supported by our Microsoft subject matter experts. As far as the what we're going to be covering over the next couple of weeks, as I mentioned, today's session will be focused on media and network quality. On Thursday, we're going to be reviewing advanced call scenarios, and next week's focus is going to be more on devices, so around deploying Teams devices and monitoring and managing Teams devices. We'd love for you to be joining all of our sessions if that's what you're signed up for. And we recognize everybody's busy and got lots going on. All the sessions are going to be recorded and posted on our Superheroes YouTube channel. I'm going to be sharing the details on the next slide. So you'll have access to the material if you can't attend. And if you wanted to go back and look at some of the things that were covered, that will be very much so possible. All right, so speaking of our YouTube channel, you see on the point 4 here, you'll have access to the YouTube channel. All you need to do, and you can do that right now, just click on the link. You won't see the, obviously, material from today's sessions up there just yet, but once you start accessing it, you want to be looking for Canada Converged Communications Customer Hub. All the records and all the sessions will be posted there after productions are completed. The decks will be hosted on our Yammer community, and you can see that on the point 2, it says after a day or 2, you should be able to access the Superheroes community. That's our Yammer community. Before you do so, we need you to complete a consent form. We take your privacy here at Microsoft very seriously, so we want to make sure that you know that your name and organization name will be shared on the Yammer community. That's the purpose of the consent form. Once you do so, you can access the Yammer community, and we recommend you sign up for it with your work email. All right, couple of other small housekeeping. So you'll notice that right now all lines are muted. That's just to avoid any disruption to our speakers. But please, we highly encourage you to use the chat to type in questions. We have a couple of awesome moderators and subject matter experts today that are going to be answering your questions in the background. So take advantage of the chat and their subject matter expertise. Once the Q&A starts, we'll take you off the mute, and you'll be able to actually raise your virtual hand and start asking questions. All right. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to our speakers today. We have Peter Haas, one of our customer success managers based in Vancouver, and David Whitney, one of our fast track engineers here with us today. I'll let them do the introductions themselves and pass it on to you, Peter.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's good to see when I look at the participants here today. Thank you to all the customers that have shown up. So I'm Peter Haas. I'm based out of Vancouver. I'm a customer success manager in Converged Communications. So that's anything voice and video, if you think of that. And I'm here as a post-sales role to help be successful in Teams Phone and Rooms. So I've been doing this for about, calculated over 30 years now already. So I hope to at least share a few nuggets with you today. And I'm joined with David.
Yeah, hey everybody, this is David Whitney, as mentioned on the slide, a fast track engineer. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, down in the USA, but joining this excellent session for you all north of the border here. I also deal with Teams as a specialty area, Teams Voice as well, and looking forward to this session in particular. I mean, all of the sessions are really good, but sometimes it's easy to forget what goes into a successful deployment here, and Peter's going to talk about the first half, and we'll do some fun demo stuff, mock demo at least in the back half. So thank you very much.
All right, so I am going to actually launch straight into a bit of a poll here to ask a few questions. So just kind of curious, what is the status of your Teams deployment today? Are we using Teams just for chat collaboration only? Are we using it for meetings, P2P, which is Teams to Teams calling? Have we started a phone pilot? Or we just don't use Teams today? So this will help me a little bit gauge exactly what we're, how to tailor my talk today. Great, a lot of answers coming in here already. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks for answering those. So it looks like quite a few of you have started already a little bit, even somebody who hasn't used Teams at all. So that's great for your curiosity. All right, one more question here. Again, a little bit to help me talk today. But in your organization, who's responsible for monitoring and troubleshooting media quality? I'm the person responsible. I lead a team that is responsible. I'm part of a team. We do have multiple teams sharing this responsibility, or I'm not sure. So no wrong answer here at all. Okay, great. Thanks for all the answers there. Okay, and I'm going to jump ahead here. So here's the topics that now I'm part of your Canadian team here for customer success, and there's actually a group of us here in Canada, and we're well supported here by Fast Track, which is David. He's helping me out on this talk today. But in behind the scenes here today, we have also a bunch of cloud solution architects which support us in delivery. And we kind of came up with an agenda. This is session one, as Masan said there earlier, out of 4. And this is kind of the foundational piece. So I am involved in actually quite a few, unfortunately, bad call quality investigations, right? And this is coming out of those experiences, if you want to call it that. So I'm going to cover today a little bit of what tools we have, call analytics, time reporting, real-time reporting, quality foundations. We're going to go into call quality dashboarding. So this is where David is going to go, nice and deep and show you around, and a little bit of a call to action. So you're going to get some homework at the end of this session today. All right. So quality. Quality is a whole bunch of things to us here at Microsoft. So not only the media, can we establish a call? Can we keep a call up? How does it sound? Right? What's the user feedback? We also, if you've used Teams already, for the one person here that's joined today that hasn't used Teams yet, Teams does have actual user feedback, so we can tell if a user is happy or not at their quality. And we're going to show you as well a little bit today on how to do some proactive analysis, how to use some of our telemetry, how to go and have a look how healthy is not only a user, but say, for example, a building or a site. Right? And what's our end user adoption? So user training is also actually a bit of, call quality, reliability. Okay, quality matters. So I admire everybody that's showing up here today. So the thing with real-time voice and video, it's probably one of the more stressful roles in IT. And you're going to have to excuse me. My dog has chosen this time to knock on my door. Voice needs to be up and running all the time. right? It's just an expectation that a customer has is when you pick up a handset that there's dial tone. So I have this beauty thing here. So this is not as good as Mary Beth's prop when she does this, but I just did my home renovation here and I hauled this thing off the wall. So this is going back on my wall, by the way. It's a great phone. And a long way that we've come today, like here, I'm also demoing here at my house, the poly-rove deck phones that are behind our SIP gateways. So we've gone from this analog to digital world, but our expectations are still the same. We pick up the phone, we expect a dial tone, we just expect it to work. So hopefully we're going to give you some tools here today on how to do that. So what's the tool set that we actually have inside Teams? Inside the Teams Admin Center, we have lots of reporting in there. So the reporting, and I'll show you a little bit, is that we have some good, I'll call them, say, manager reports, right? What's our usage? Let's go look at how many people are using audio conferencing. What's our minutes? How is our live events doing? We have those types of things in there. Usage reporting and call quality. I mentioned here, this is where David is going to go a little bit deeper. How do we troubleshoot a user individually? How do we go inside? We have this dashboard. And if you didn't know it, Teams, after every call, sends all its telemetry up into a giant database, the call quality dashboard database. And we can mine that. And we have some dashboards today to share with you that will help you actually mine that data and give you a really good proactive, or at least historical side, but help you engage things a little more proactively. And then we have some other tools here, which are, nice and simple from a web page point of view, you can direct users to, which they're connectivity tools. And there's lots of testing there. Not only can we do voice and video or voice testing there for Teams, how good's our quality, but there's things in there, for example, like on Exchange. We can test our connectivity to that. So from the Teams Admin Center, and if you look on your left-hand rail towards the bottom, there are usage reports. In these usage reports, we have things like I mentioned before, PSTN data, how many minutes are actually being used if we're just using audio conferencing right now, for example. And if we are going into our voice pilots, what is actually being used? And this is usually an important question that I get. Is this service actually being used? And how much is it being used? Are we on an upward trend or a downward trend? Do we need to do anything about it? So those are usually the manager type questions that we get. You'll see these are not really customizable. They're canned. So there's not much ability to go in here and actually tunnel into the data a lot or drill through and get any deeper, but they're pretty good. Now, when we look at a support map, so I have a bit of a direct routing. So if you're not familiar with Teams Phone, there are many ways to actually do Teams Phone. There is something called calling plans, which Microsoft provides all the telephony behind that. And we can go all the way to the other spectrum where you are providing your own telephony service. And when we're looking at call quality or doing investigations, where are the locations of these dashboards or the data that we need to go and look at? So this is kind of where we are here mostly today in this session, or this section right here. It's in between a session border controller and the team service. There we have really good, rich data. You'll see that it's almost overwhelming when you start going into the dashboard how much data is actually here. If we do need to troubleshoot direct routing, we're into SBC logs. There's PBX logs. Sometimes if things are really bad, we're talking to actual PSTN providers. Doesn't happen often. From a call analytics point of view, so now this is where some of our roles come into play, and I'll go over that a little bit later, what's required as well to get at this data. But in the Teams Admin Center, if you have a Teams admin role or some type of communication specialist role, you'll be able to get at this user data. And in the user data, you'll see there's a tab in there for call history. And in the call history, we are going to expose things like devices, networks, connectivity, and do a bit of an interpretation from a Microsoft point of view on what is the call quality. That's usually available within 15 minutes of the call, and we'll keep that data for 30 days, and then we're going to strip off personally identifiable information. So that's important to know, and this is maybe a typical call. You'll get a call from somebody saying, hey, we had a really terrible call, and you'll go in the Teams admin center. You might not actually see this data yet. You'll have to wait 15 minutes for all of it to get in so you can see it historically. Okay. If the call is actually running right now, so this is another typical scenario that I've had before. You get a call from the CIO, oh, we're in the middle of a meeting, or I'm in the middle of a call and it's terrible. Can you help me? So yes, we can actually help with that. Should cover this one slide here first. If we do actually click on the user, this is again just exposing a little bit of the information that we have available for us here. But if you notice, there is right in the middle, right here, it says audio quality good. So that was Microsoft's interpretation of what was actually, what did we think the call was? We go here, what's the audio capture device? And this is a good one. I don't know if anyone can see, I always call this, well, the person was either yelling into their laptop or they're using basically a non-approved certified headset. They're either using like a 3.5 millimeter headset, which we see a lot from a old cell phone or something, or some sort of Apple device in here. And same thing here with the video and so on. We can see that they're not using really actually anything other than the laptop's audio and video device here for doing their work. Okay. Now back to that CIO call. I'm in a meeting right now. Things are not going well. In that user view on the Teams admin center, we can actually see not only historical calls that have happened, but we can actually see real-time calls that are in progress. And you'll see that here in recent meetings. And that will be only there for about 24 hours. After 24 hours, this kind of real-time view will disappear and it'll go down into the historical. What we can do here is we can actually, you'll see there's 6 participants here in this meeting. We can click on this and expand further to see each individual leg of the call, right? So if you look at how Teams is doing, each one of these people is going directly to the team service. We have a bit of a view now. It's not in this screenshot here, but we can see things like packet loss and round trip. And I would usually wait for about a minute for this to populate, and I'll start to understand here, okay, I can see the one particular user is causing, and that's usually what's happening, right? Is a person that is either not in the office, at a home network, they have a really bad connection, and it's one person that is making the perception that the whole meeting or the whole call is actually going, sour. But that'll start giving you that type of view here. Okay. If I click into, in this case here, I clicked onto Adele, I can see a little bit more information from her in this case. I see it's a Wi-Fi network. We'll see when we go in the call quality dashboard later, when David starts speaking, we can actually see even percentage of Wi-Fi. What was their signal strength? We see their network address here, when they started the call, how long it's currently been up. And we start to see graphs in the bottom, the audio stream for the inbound and outbound. So we're always measuring both directions, from the client into Teams and Teams back to the client. And what I like about these graphs is anything that we consider a breach will start to color red. So if we're looking here at packet loss or jitter, if we breach any of our metrics, you'll see the lines start to color red, and then we can see this in real time. And this is good too when we want to do some troubleshooting with a network team. We usually just stand up a Teams call, we get in this type of view, and the network team is starting to go look through the switches, firewalls, or any type of intrusion detection systems that we're dealing with. And we'll do a real-time kind of, oh yeah, check that switch, and we'll see if things change here as we're doing this. Okay, I'm going to do another pop quiz for you and see if you're still awake with me. So, poor audio quality. Now, may that be experienced here when callers are geographically far apart, when caller has poor network conditions, caller hasn't had enough coffee or tea, kind of like me this morning, or the caller is on Windows 95. What do you think? All right, seeing at least a few answers here today. I like those people that are being cheeky and answering with coffee and tea. That's pretty funny. So just to kind of give the answer away here, but yes, it is actually when, network conditions are poor. So being geographically far apart, yes, speed of light is speed of light, and we do start to introduce something called latency in there. Usually, okay, you might have a bit of delay, but it usually doesn't affect a call. And I'll show you some of the metrics on the latency side of things, but generally, if we have poor network conditions, that is going to be our issue. Okay, and one more, and I promise it's the last one. So a call will be marked as poor when 2 or more users experience the same problem, Teams client is out of date, user submitted a 3-star rating, or threshold for average jitter, round trip, and packet loss is exceeded. So this is a hard one maybe, because there might actually seem a few right answers here. What do you think? All right, a few people coming in. Some thinking it's a 3-star. Some thinking when 2 or more people experience the same issue. So the correct answer is actually when the average jitter, round trip, or packet loss is exceeded. That's when we actually mark a call as poor or bad. And I'll go further into that here to explain a little bit. So quality foundations. So when I am dealing in a little bit of, my bad call quality analysis or troubleshooting with a client, this is basically where we start. It's really important to have a good solid foundation. So quality for us here at Microsoft is 2 sides of the house, right? From our networking, from our actual physical point of view, the telemetry that we're getting from the Teams clients, jitter, packet loss, round trip. These are, fundamental to any voice platform. And you'll see it if you're dealing with Cisco, Avaya, Zoom. We all kind of have the same type of metrics. We cannot actually keep calls up when any of these are falling apart. We're not doing actually really any type of major type of magic here. We have ways of dealing with poor networks. You'll see in some of the codecs that I'll talk about a little bit later here is with Silk and Satin. We can deal with fluctuating network conditions. We can adjust our audio profiles to deal with that, to deal over distances and poor networks. But there is a point of time when we can't deal with it either. Reliability. Can we actually keep a call up? Can we establish a call first of all? That's a setup. Or are we dropping a call midway? So we can report on those items too. And when we're going through the call analytics or we're going through a call quality dashboard investigation, we'll know that. We'll see in the timelines whether calls were drops. We'll see error messages when the endpoint disappeared. Okay, they didn't actually do a proper buy command. They just dropped. Are we using headsets, proper headsets? Again, quite interesting to find out too when we're dealing with, somebody with garbled audio. Okay, what's going on? Instead of pointing our finger directly at network or so, it could be something as simple as Bluetooth or updating the firmware on a headset. There's a few things we have to consider here. And we talk about this time and time again, and I know the CSAs here, they're joining me, supporting me on this call here today. This is a subject that we talk about all the time, right? VPN split tunneling, proxy bypass, right? There's certain things we have to do, certain vendors that, like us to maybe not do split tunneling or so, but you'll see, I'll have some slides here a little bit later that all the vendors do have cookbooks or guidance on how to actually make teams successful. It's pretty important for us. User experience, the other side of the house, this is the user perspective, right? We might have a call that's completely marked good. So we'll look at the call analytics. We're not seeing any packet loss. We're not seeing any jitter. Latency looks great. But then the user is just unhappy for some reason, right? You know, what were their issues? So, you know, we'll go into that as well. So back to that poll that I just did, right? We classify calls on averages. So there might be maximums that, you know, exceed these thresholds here that I have on the screen, like average jitter beyond 30 milliseconds. We might peak beyond that. If our average is within 30 milliseconds, if our average packet loss, this looks pretty high, right? 10% average round trip under 500 milliseconds, right? We are going to start marking a call as bad. But I know, you know, there's probably a lot of you on this call too that realize, you know, packet loss over 2-3%, we're going to start hearing that. We're going to already start hearing what Teams is doing to try and get around packet loss. We're going to see things in the call quality dashboard, in the telemetry, in the debug, things like conceal, right? Teams is trying to repair and actually try and figure out missing packets. It's trying to fill that in so at least we can kind of understand what was going on in the voice. So we can tell that, or packets receiving out of order. You know, Teams actually behind the scenes is pretty amazing at trying to do self-healing while network conditions are maybe not in favor. Okay. We'll go over where we find a lot of these things, and we're going to measure all of these, right? We're going to measure not only the voice stream, but video is going to be singled out here as well, and as well screen sharing. You're going to see in our telemetry, VBSS is going to be singled out for screen sharing. The other question I get a lot too from network teams is what to expect from a Teams deployment. So Teams phone, video, what is our actual footprint? So here's a bit of a chart for what our minimum and recommended and, you know, best performance bandwidths are. From my point of view, I usually estimate 1.5 to 2 megs for video. Especially this comes into play a lot when we're dealing with live event scenarios. For example, how many people are watching a particular show or video. If we have a lot of, you know, and I know there's a lot of healthcare people on the call here today, for example, right? If we are having morning and afternoon sessions with, you know, either nursing staff or so where video is being used, you can imagine the network team seeing these huge spikes in the morning and then in the afternoon. You know, what is the footprint of each person joining that call? Kind of gives us a good idea on how to do some math here on sizing a network. Sizing a network is pretty important. One of the topics too that comes up for a lot with me, and I don't actually have a slide on this particularly, but is QoS. Do I need QoS on a network? You know, QoS we use only if we consider the network is constrained in any way. You know, and I have seen networks, for example, peak up to 80%. You know, we still got 20% headroom on network, but we are now already, you know, experiencing some sort of either packet loss is usually showing up or some type of jitter is starting to show in our telemetry. But the network team usually, you know, I shouldn't say usually, but we'll have a hard time figuring out what things are because there's still capacity in the network. But we're starting to already push some limits at around 80%. It's usually my experience. So, and I like to thank Max. So if you're watching the chat here today, Max is one of our CSAs, really kind of one of my lifeguards that helps me on deployments, but he's able to answer some of your chats there today. So you'll see some of these metrics here too. And I get asked this a lot, especially the unclassified. When we're looking at call quality or the call quality analysis of a user, and we'll see either unclassified, you know, or the poor and the good. So how did we get an unclassified? So, and this kind of shocked me too, actually. But one of the good ones here is, well, okay, the call was really short, so we had less than 60 seconds of data to actually do any type of analysis on. We had a low packet utilization, so the caller stayed muted, right? So I'm pretty sure you know a lot of people that join meetings and don't say anything. So when we're muted on Teams, we're not actually sending any telemetry. And this is one of the harder things when I deal with, for example, direct routing scenarios where the session border controller has a connection to a Teams client. That Teams client, when they're on mute, they're not actually sending any media towards the session border controller, for example. So somebody listening into an audio conference call, for example, there's nothing there to analyze. QoE reports, so the endpoint may not send anything, or there's a network outage or something that's prevented us from getting at the data. Now, if we're seeing a lot of unclassifieds, okay, then I'm going to start questioning, things like, is there a firewall in the way that's actually blocking, or something not open to the Teams service or the Teams client that is allowing us to get this data? But normally you should see most of your calls either being classified as a good or a poor. Okay? Shouldn't see too many unclassifieds. The rate my call. So about 10% of the time, if you're on a Teams call or a Teams meeting, you're going to see presented with this call quality kind of 1 out of 5 stars. Now, what kind of shocks people to learn a lot of the times is we can actually get this data. We can actually see people that are, clicking on the 1 star or people clicking on the 5 star. How do we know who's happy and who isn't? So, and how do we actually classify from a user perspective what is good and what is bad? Anything 1 or 2 stars is considered, a poor call from a user perspective. And anything 4 or less, we're going to actually give a free text box here for a user to do some selections and tell us in their own words on why they think it wasn't a 5 star. Hey, why didn't we blow your socks off, right? Why wasn't the quality good? So we can expose that. And they're really good reports, and I think David will actually show this later on here too. There is actually nice reports here call out, your 1 star users, who are your most unhappy users. Let's go make a proactive call to them, see why they're unhappy, and we'll see. Sometimes the data doesn't actually support, and you saw our metrics, what we're breaching on, those averages of 30 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds of latency. If we're under those metrics, we're going to mark it as good. Users giving us a 1 star, that might take some digging into on why and understanding the whole story. We have a bunch of, this is coming now out of a bunch of guidance here, and I'll go further into what the guidance actually is. But there's a bunch of steps that we need to do. So I usually say to somebody embarking on a Teams phone journey is, you've probably had somebody design your Cisco or your Avaya in-house, right? Their knowledge is actually very valuable, right? Because Teams voice, Teams phone is still voice when you look underneath it. So why was, the Cisco call manager designed this way? Why was it given, for example, maybe its own separate VLAN? Why was it given QoS, those treatments? Usually the guidance that I give to the customers that I lead on this journey is, if we've done it into one phone system, it's usually probably your learnings there we should apply into going to Teams phone. Or if we're not using Teams phone yet, even if we're just starting to use Teams for meetings, we should already understand that. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about a few of these, especially points 1 and 2, and we'll go into the VPN side of the house here. But this is a really good slide. I agree with Mark here, again, one of our CSAs here supporting our fast track engineers that are supporting us here today, right? This is a super important slide deck. And if, the whole event, if you get this, you're on a really good foundation. Usually how I start when I speak about a foundation of call quality is right here at our networking principles. So this actually is the entire Microsoft 365 stack. And here is really the primary goal. And I put the link here in the bottom. And what is our goal? It's the fastest path to our team service or to our whole Microsoft 365 service, right? Prevent hairpins, prevent going through the whole, the old traditional hub and spoke model that we had for networking, right? The branch office going through the head office and then out to the internet. I see a lot of organizations being very successful with SD-WAN, for example, and giving local breakouts for their branch offices directly for certain team services. And I'll show you, it doesn't need to be everything, right? And that is not what we're saying. It doesn't need to be the whole Microsoft 365 stack, has to go direct as fast as possible. From a voice and video perspective, absolutely. Any gain, any faster connection, the better. The other thing that comes up a lot is, well, Teams is on the internet. I can't control internet. You're absolutely right. You cannot control internet. But what you can control is up to that border, up to that egress. Make that experience or that path the shortest and the best that it can be. And hopefully your service provider and so has good connections to the internet. And then this is where discussions like SD-WAN come into play, right? Let's give ourselves multiple paths now to this new data center, because that's what we're talking about here. Microsoft 365 is our new data center. There's some certain terminologies in this guidance that I go through, and I make sure that everyone understands what the definitions are, because these are really important when we start to dig in and I show, what IP addresses are we going towards from a team service, right? We can't just plunk Teams in there and start doing meetings. Hey, we might be successful if we have a really big network with lots of capacity and bandwidth. We might be successful. But it's important to know these three categories: optimize, allow, and default. So when we talk optimize, and this isn't just Teams, you'll see it listed for Exchange and SharePoint as well. They have optimized categories. But what is being asked here is anything against the optimized category has to be unimpeded as much as possible. And that goes from everything from, deep packet inspection. Security teams love to inspect everything. This is one category where we will see problems, guaranteed. And especially too when we talk about VPN setups. Usually in pilots, with VPNs, we usually don't see issues right away off the bat. But when we go to scale and when we push out into production, if we haven't actually paid attention to this optimized category, I can only explain it to be like a brick wall. It is like you hit a brick wall on their first day of production. And I've been, unfortunately, to a few customers where, this is what we're doing is we're going through these fundamentals again and going through this optimized category. The other ones here, like allow and default, hey, you'll see it. They like allow will benefit from it. Is it an absolute requirement? No, it isn't. But it will benefit if you do it. I guess, no real losses if your security department just says, no, we're going to scan this, or it needs to take a different path. And default, it just needs to get to 365. We don't necessarily care about the latency here. Okay, going into here now, this is where we publish what addresses we're going to. So this is the number one thing for firewall and security people. And you'll see the category there that I was speaking about. Here's where we classify, optimize, or allow, or default. And we'll see the service that's in there, right? Now, okay, there's /14/15s for that optimized category up there, but that is the whole service. And the other thing that I see a lot here too is you can't actually pick and choose. If it says required or allowed, right, or optimize, you can't pick out Skype, for example. That's one thing that I see a lot. It's like, well, we're not using Skype, we're just using Teams. Well, is it in the allow or required? Like, is it needed, or is it in here in an allow optional, for example? If it says required, guess what? It's required. okay, because we still are using services from there. And you'll see, yes, Skype naming is still used a little bit when we're doing our analysis and testing. You know, there are still some legacy services that are coming over. We still use some of that infrastructure. Okay. Now, the other question I get here too is, well, do these IP addresses change? You know, and they actually did. You know, last year there was actually a change in the optimized category. There was a subnet increase, I guess, for more services, you know, as our infrastructure expands. This is published. There is the Office 365 Message Center, and you should be subscribing to messages coming from Microsoft. We will give lots of notice. There's like at least six, I'm going to say maybe 3 months. There's quite a few, I'm not sure actually on that one now. Maybe one of the CSAs can help me out with my lifeguards. But there is lots of warning here. So it's posted in the message center, and you should get an email if you're subscribing to certain services, if we're changing an IP address, if we're adding a new range. Okay, and that's important to do. Now you'll see I have a little bit of these. These are mainly for your guidance. Afterwards, like Masan has said here, you're going to get access. This will be posted on YouTube and in our channel, and it will be, the slide deck I think is available too. So I'm giving some supporting documentation on here on UDP. Teams communicates on UDP for voice. If we cannot get UDP, we're going to fail over to TCP 443. And you're going to see David will show some call quality dashboard where we can call this out. You know, do we see the 443 coming up? Okay, we don't see UDP voice on the call here. So that's right away an indication that there's something standing in the way of UDP from actually establishing, and we're failing over to a TCP. Okay, it's so important. And you'll see a lot of, you know, again, Cisco, Zoom, Avaya, we're all using UDP. UDP is the best mechanism here to give voice. We don't actually care about an acknowledgement of a network packet. You know, send a network packet, TCP will actually ask all the time back for an acknowledgement. Did you get my data? No, you didn't? Okay, here it is again. UDP just sends it. I don't care about an acknowledgement back. I'm just going to send, here's my stream. Okay. Now, this is a tidbit, and for many of you that I work with, I don't know whether you actually know this. So I thought I would expose it out on here. So, and it came up in one of my call quality investigations. So that URL list that we had for the optimized category, an organization actually did try and filter it by region of the world. So, and I don't know whether you knew this, but the first person in the call for a Teams meeting actually determines where this Teams meeting is being held. For example, here, this is a US tenant with US people joining a call. First person in the US will determine the closest point for them and spin up this media center for Teams to connect to, and we're all connecting to that. If we have Europe involved in here, and the first person joining the call is from Europe, even though it's a US tenant here in this example, that meeting is being hosted in Europe. So I always say, you know, if we have a pretty big conference, and a few of the customers that I see on the line here, for example, South America might be more of an example. If we have a big meeting with South America and North America, where's the majority of our people? You know, I coach the EAs, right? Okay, and most of the bosses are here in North America. Can you stand up that call nice and early? Get that going. Let's do an audio check. Let's do some checking on the call. Let's get that meeting centered here in North America, right? If we have only a few people joining from South America, be a much better experience here for that. Okay, and that's latency. That's that geographically distant. This is where, you know, it might be a delay. We might have excellent jitter, you know, no jitter, no packet loss, but a little bit of latency is involved here. That delay in speaking, we hear that when sometimes if it gets too long, we're really now talking over each other. Split tunnel VPN. So this is where I mentioned, and we have a few of the vendors here at the bottom. All of them actually list out cookbooks or how to optimize for the Microsoft service. and for Teams and for Teams Voice. All of them recognize that that needs to be done, and it should be done. Because again, UDP, we all use UDP, whether we're Cisco or Microsoft or Zoom. We all need to be optimized and basically an unimpeded path to the network. So again, look for your vendor here, and if you don't, the other one we were talking about too is when we talk about proxies, and Zscaler came up. So Zscaler just came with an interesting option. I was explaining to the guys earlier that I saw one really good implementation with Zscaler in there. There's actually a tick box now in that product to say optimize Teams voice, and it automatically takes care of that optimized category for us, and we're done. And it's night and day difference. When I am dealing here too, for example, some of the other ones that comes up is Palo Alto. Pretty good VPN setup. We don't necessarily see anything going on in pilots. So if we have maybe even 100 people on a Palo Alto, for example, but as soon as we go out into scale or production, this is where VPN appliances usually fall apart. There's too much processing going on here with encryption, de-encryption, re-encrypting. It's just too much, or the double encryption that the VPN tunnel usually creates. So very important. You'll see again too, David is going to show a nice screen inside the call quality dashboard. We will do tests or evaluations on whether we think VPN split tunneling is on or off. And there's a way too that we can actually build out the call quality dashboard to show your own where your VPN networks are and aren't, and actually check yourself as well without us actually trying to calculate. Proxies, again, a slide in here just to help support on why we think it's so important that they need to be bypassed. And I'm going to come up to a call quality champion here. Okay, so this is now actually an important role. Okay, we have a bunch of tools inside or that we're still going to show you here today. So thank you for holding on. But this is actually a role in every organization. Somebody needs to have eyes on this, right? And it's not really a one and done. You know, we're going to go look at the quality, give ourselves a good foundation. We've done the optimized category on the networks, and we're done. No, we want to at least make sure that we're safe, for example, on a monthly cadence. Okay, and that's something that I do as a customer success manager, is we talk a lot about operations. What's your operations support like for Teams Phone, Teams Rooms, right? So let's get a monthly cadence to go start looking at some of the dashboards that we're about to show you here today. Okay. You're going to see Teams, it's kind of a funny joke in a way, Teams and Skype was too. It's a great canary in a coal mine, right? It's worked in the mining industry for a while, so you know it's kind of mining pun there. But you have these network probes. Basically, every Teams client out there, whether it be a room or a client on a mobile phone or on a laptop, is sending in this great telemetry, right? And we can actually do something with that. This is another area that comes up a lot, and is what is the right role to get at the data? You know, how can I get at real-time call analytics, or how can I get, you know, at the dashboards that David's about to show you here? So the main one for me is Global Reader. Global Reader gives us access to the reports and actually even into a lot of the personal data. So can we see who is having a bad call, right? And that's a lot. Who is having the call? If we are a really dispersed support desk and we don't want to expose, for example, people's names, we can go down into a comm support specialist where we're obscuring, for example, we look at a big meeting, we can't actually see all the people's names. We see the endpoints, but we don't really get a grasp of who is there, but we get an idea from a simplistic point of view if there's something there that needs to be escalated into another tier. The one I like to go for a lot here that I usually coach on is this column here, the Teams Comm Support Engineer. Okay, this one is going to be the one that can get you into a user profile and actually get real-time call analytics. I can't do that in Global Reader. I can do that in this Comm Support Engineer role. I can get in there. The other one from now it's actually not on here, but from a Teams Room point of view, there's a device administrator. The device administrator doesn't have access to this, right? They have maybe some very rough or overall idea of quality, but they can't dig deep. They can't get in. So a device administrator, we usually support that here either with a Global Reader, go further into Comm Support Engineer. Okay, we don't need to give away a full Teams service admin or even a Teams comms admin. A Teams comms admin is somebody that actually is manipulating the Teams phone service, that is either changing, a dial plan or a voice route or something to deal with the phone service itself. But if we're just dealing with phones, giving out phone numbers, troubleshooting calls, the comm support engineer is a great role to give out. Okay. Now, just before I kind of pass this over to David, I don't know if, the good old days we had, this. So I don't know if anyone in the chat can tell me what something like this would be, but, I just redid my whole house here in a reno, but really helpful tool for me from a phone point of view and how to hook up my old phone here again. See if anyone can actually guess what that is. But we will show you some of the tools here coming up next in this call quality dashboard. Now it is there by default. Okay, it is there in a basic form. David's going to show you how to build it into, I'll call it call quality dashboard 2.0, right? How it's going to benefit you and look in even deeper into your network. Okay, so pay attention. This is where it gets really interesting. David, I'm going to pass this over to you, but let's build out that call quality dashboard.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Excellent stuff. And if you haven't been paying attention in the chat too, there's been some excellent pro tips and links and reading by our friendly SMEs in the chat here. So if you don't have the chat tab open, you should open it now and review while we dive into a couple more things specific to call quality dashboard here. So first thing here is the building file. What is building file? Why do we need it? Now, Teams as a service hosted on Microsoft Cloud has to make the assumption by default anyway that everything is an external call from the perspective of your customer network, right? We don't know about your network without you telling us. So we see these terms in the call quality dashboard for your managed network, right? Your internal or inside network. This is what we do want to be able to mark and say, all right, this is our internal network. These are our subnets behind our NATed IPs, our ISP connections, while the rest of it will continue to be marked as unmanaged or outside or external. To make this distinction within call quality dashboard, we'll create a building file and upload that into call quality dashboard itself. So you saw that web view, the cqd.teamsmicrosoft.com. That is where we will upload it. Although we'll get into Power BI here in a second, this building file upload has to be done back in the web view. It'll be a CSV. You'll build it out with your network data. Just a quick note here, this third item, just to pay attention to with the headers, as just trips up literally everybody who does this for the very first time. The CSV that the building file is going to be uploaded as does not expect headers to be in there, right? Just the data itself. But what is that data? We kind of pivoted on it here, right? So the column on the left here, the name, those are your column left to right in the CSV itself. But the first four here, right, are really the basic network and building name information that defines the kind of the core piece of the building file that we're going to upload in call quality dashboard and be interpreted and compared against your client data in CQD itself. So we're going to need, of course, the subnet that we're going to map to, and then the third column, how big is that subnet that we're going to try to map it to. And along with that, what is network and building name that this subnet is associated to? So you can get very granular here. If you can get to, like an example here, second floor Wi-Fi, that's going to be an excellent way to be able to get to details here. We can make reports that expand on these things. But if you would stand to have just a very broad, kind of flat subnet space, that's good too, right? Even if we don't get specific building or subnet names as part of this, the last few columns here with inside corp in particular, those are going to be what we have to see for it to be marked as inside, right? So you'll see inside corp, mark it as 1. Basically, every row that you're going to put in here inside of your building file will have inside corp marked 1. Express route. If you have express route, you will know what to do with this column. If you are not sure what that is, just keep them 0, right? So we don't mark it on that. The middle ones here are for your use, right? They're all optional. If they're all blank, it's not going to harm anything, right? We're still going to be able to process the file, but this again is for you to be able to build reports around. Like, you'll see some examples of with the ISP information that we're able to get based on the public IPs of our various media connections. We can make assumptions about what your location is based on that ASN data, but you know where your specific buildings are, maybe even where they are in certain regions, what kind of buildings they are even. We can pivot on these things in certain reports if you're able to put it in. This is, again, for your benefit to have richer reports where, although we'll have a ton of rich data, and we'll see examples of that, even without this in here, this allows us to make that first initial pivot on, is it my managed network that I can do something about, or is it everybody at home or wherever they're getting coffee? I was about to say Starbucks, but although it's up there, there's other coffee up there too that I'm aware of. But the other thing here is on a VPN. So very important. We've talked about VPN a couple times. We do want to avoid use of VPN for media if we can swing it, right? However, where we can still report on VPN usage, that's going to be really valuable to do, right? So maybe we do have some areas or some certain users who were not able to do split tunneling or not split tunneling yet. It is absolutely recommended and very useful to put in the VPN subnets separately from the other managed subnets you have in there. This last column that has a 0 or 1 in it will denote it for call quality dashboards processing, whether it's going to be a VPN map subnet through the processing side. And of course, the name that you'll put in there should be descriptive as well when you put it in. All right, so with the building file uploaded as all but a prereq, but again, even if you don't, although we've had the CQD web portal for a long time, for the last few years, we've also had the ability to have Power BI reports connect to that same call quality dashboard data. And kind of as it says here on this slide, unleashing the power of it, it really kind of did make for a sea change as to how we approach call quality dashboard analytics and what is possible with reports in there. And most of that's due to Power BI's flexibility in the kinds of views and tables and filters we can do with a ton of flexibility and density of information compared to the classic CQD web view has tables and charts, which are good, but we can do even more with Power BI. We do have some truly excellent pre-built reports, and we'll be doing a mock demo with kind of the main one here, this quality of experience report, or QER. But there are others like the auto tenant call queue historical report, which is very important for customers who are starting to use auto tenants call queues to see stats about how a call is routed within those voice apps. And although CQD isn't itself truly a usage reporting tool, we can get statistics based on the metrics that we capture to get a general sense of where phone utilization, media utilization is within the organization as well. And there's a handful of others, like a Teams room specific one that is all pre-filtered to your meeting room devices as well to see their quality separated out from all the other user data in here. We do have descriptions of all of these templates on our docs pages. Obviously, not going to read this slide, but tons of information in this set of data. So with that said, let's actually jump into kind of a mock demo here again of the QER, Quality of Experience Review template. We're not going to look at every page. That would take a good, another 90 minutes beyond what we're already going through. But we're going to look at a few key pages from that report. So in terms of framing this out, we are looking at the Power BI desktop, or if you've published it to Power BI Online, looking at that, Power BI view, but behind the scenes, we have connected it to Call Quality Dashboard, and we'll talk about how to do that afterwards as well. So what we're going to start at is the Home tab, and this should immediately show you that there's going to be a lot in here, right? Every one of these kind of links or descriptions inside of this Home tab is a report. You kind of see down at the bottom too. These are all report pages within Power BI template that have different views of Call Quality Dashboard information. The main one that we usually start with, just to say, all right, so what's the story here, is the Media Health tab. This is your very much top-down view. Again, the data you see in here with the charts and numbers is some mock data, right? I've blurred out some of the things here, just if you notice that, but it's all kind of real kind of data. But this Media Health tab is, if you're going to get kind of an executive summary from Call Quality Dashboard, it's going to be this tab or maybe a slight adjustment to it. Along the top, we see the kind of the speedometer view of metrics. We talked about the classifiers for good and poor. So these speedometers or sort of chart views here with the numbers at the top are how we as a whole org-wide view look against those metrics. What is the percentage of audio streams that are being marked as poor? In this case, you can see it's less than 1%, which is great, right? You can see in green, it's under that 3% typically for a lot of these metrics. For video or freeze rate of videos, those are also within metrics in this particular example. Sharing rate as well. From a reliability perspective, those are also metrics that we capture as part of this from either an inability to set up the call, which is very low in this case, which is great. That means firewall rules are in place. Proxies aren't blocking things, but even also from an unexpected call drop perspective, right? Even if we've done all the good work of opening up the firewall, maybe we're getting unexpected drops due to other reasons as well. And so the drop failure rate will show that as well. And we touched on it briefly as well earlier, the rate my call or RMC, those 1 to 5 stars you see at the end of a call, that's the poor feedback rate. So if they've marked things as 1 or 2 stars, that'll contribute to this percentage as well. Again, in the case of this demo, things are looking pretty good. It's about 1%. So one takeaway here would be, for example, let's say all the metrics look good, but users are still marking it poor, some above 5%, above 10% even amount of time. That is something to look into. It could be that users are taking those 1 to 5 stars and interpreting it as, well, I didn't like the content of this meeting, right? Which is something that can happen if users are not sure what that star rating means. It could be that they're interpreting it as, oh, I didn't like the things that were said in this particular meeting. But it is intended, of course, for not that, but for a network metric specifically. And through the rest of here, we have charts of what has been over time, what's the trend of these metrics that we've talked about for audio and video. In this case, for example, we can see that there was a spike. You can see the dates there if you zoom in around the end of December and beginning of January. This probably is due to people working not from the office or during the holidays, but that's a good example of, if we see trends, maybe we've been going at a certain amount, but we make a network change and hopefully it's going to go down and be better. But if instead goes up, or maybe there was an outage during a given week, right, it might spike and get bad. And we'll see that in these kind of historical reports. Something you'll definitely see common in these reports is the ability to change the filter. So you'll notice in the left, I actually filtered everything to conference calls, right? So meetings in this case. But let's say we wanted to instead filter to just our peer-to-peer calls. So you see, change that in the top left there, change the conference or the media type to peer-to-peer instead. We could also, for example, filter on given client types, right? Maybe you want to see the comparison of what your desktop apps are experiencing versus web, or even VDI to see, how does VDI experience compare to, right? What's the user feedback specific to VDI? So all possible here in these built-in reports, and of course you can customize these things as well. Now that's all good, but let's take a step in. Let's drill a little bit further into, in this case, audio health. So one of the common starting places from a top-down, quality champion review kind of perspective is starting in the audio health page, right? If audio is bad, then meetings are bad. If audio is good, but video is not great, meetings are still probably going to be okay. So oftentimes we'll start with, let's find where audio is having issues, as that'll be our best fix to make sure things are in a good spot, from find where firewall issues are, or bandwidth issues, things like that. Like the media health page at large, this has a view with what our metrics are for audio at the top, historical view of over time, in this case over the last 90 days, how are we trending? In this case, pretty flat, so it looks pretty good. But you notice on the left, we're starting to get more detailed data, right? Trying to get tabular data that shows specific, in this case, subnet information we've drilled to on the left, expanded to the US region. We've noticed, hey, this 172.20.10 network is actually showing a bit higher poor audio rate percentage, right? Normally, a lot of these common networks, either at home or in the office, are showing very good, right? Sub 3% that we're looking at, but this particular one, it's going above 5%. So what's going on with this network? Can we find out more details about this particular view of the network? And we absolutely can, right? One of the ways that Power BI makes unleashes the power, like we said, of Call Quality Dashboard is the ability to drill through. So, if you're doing this at home, you'd be right-clicking on this row, see this menu option for drill through, and we're going to go to the audio health details page. And when we go there, right, to this audio health details page, we are filtered to what we just drilled through, which is pretty neat. It takes this page, otherwise it'd be, again, all the potential data in your tenant, but we've filtered now, right, concentrated on this particular subnet that was of interest to us. Now, we're not going to gather everything here, but you'll notice that, hey, there's a lot more yellow and red with this particular network. And that actually makes sense, right? We started with a network that we knew that audio health was, trending up in terms of what the service is marking poor, right? The jitter, packet loss, latency is above those metrics we talked about earlier. And to talk about a few things here, again, the time charts of latency and packet loss, you can see there over time. And here we'll also see a first instance of specific UPNs, right? Specific user identities. In this view here, it would be as if I was a global reader. I don't have that end user identifiable information available to me, so they're showing up as asterisk. But let's say you're one of those roles that was team service admin, teams comms support engineer, then we would see these usernames specifically listed out as, all right, within this subnet, right? This one is 172.10.2010. Here are the users who are representative of this subnet, and specifically for that user, how has their experience been? And we could even take that drill through experience we just saw getting from audio health details. There's likewise a user health details, right? We could take one of those users and see, is this always common to them? And drill through it that way. We can also see breakdowns of which direction was the poor stream identification found more commonly. In this case, it's that first to second or downstream direction, second to first being the outbound. Seems to be slightly more an inbound problem. We've seen more people on Wi-Fi than on wired for this particular subnet. Thankfully, we do actually see that UDP, we'll get to transport in more detail in a second as well, but UDP is actually available on this subnet. So that's good, right? We're not like behind a proxy on this particular network. We do see specific conference IDs. So on the right there with the meeting audio quality, we'll see examples of this too, of drilling into specific meetings. All right, let's break apart the meeting and see what was actually going on in this meeting. But we know at least a user was on this subnet in this meeting. What else was going on with those meetings? And down at the bottom too, we were able to pull out other information about either the clients that were connected on this subnet, where they were, right? Again, we knew it was US because that's where we started, but we can also guess at where they were in the city based on their ISP. What were those ISP names? You'll see hints at what this subnet is, which we'll reveal in a second. If you can maybe guess what subnet we've looked at here and what it represents and why it might be worse than others, but still a popular choice. As well as what Wi-Fi network are you on? We talked about briefly, right, the 5 gigahertz versus 2.4. We definitely prefer the 5. So the secret and why this example pops up a lot is this 172.2010 is actually the iOS hotspot network. If you've not seen that before, this 172.2010 is the default subnet that you'll see with iOS hotspotting. So that kind of explains, oh yeah, okay, it makes a lot more sense that we're having a higher amount of packet loss or latency on hotspot connections. So although we still want to investigate users who are doing this, maybe ask them why they're on hotspots versus a better connection, but this may be a little more explainable as to why we're seeing more red and yellow from this network as opposed to others. All right, let's keep moving here. Of course, we are also able to filter based on PSTN calls specifically. So, everything we looked at and then past this page we'll look at are combining, just pure VoIP calls, as well as PSTN calls that may be happening. But we, in support of your phone deployments, also have the ability to just filter to PSTN calls specifically. And see a similar set of data that we've seen with others, but kind of drill down and pulling out data that might be more relevant to PSTN specific view, right? Or is it calling plans or direct routing users? Is there any difference in the general connectivity that their team's clients are having? Media bypass potentially playing a part here. Who are your top callers by call counter minutes, or maybe more importantly, who are the ones who are having the hardest time with their calls when they're making the PSTN calls? So particularly as you maybe are piloting a phone system deployment or are just maintaining that over time, making sure that your external PSTN calls are in as good a spot as possible from a Teams client connectivity perspective is and should absolutely be a focus here. And these pages on PSTN specifically, and there's another one that's specific to users who are subscribed to PSTN, will help narrow in that focus. Maybe a specific review call on, all right, how are PSTN callers doing, right? And how does that compare to our SBC statistics? And as Peter's mentioning earlier, right, although support boundaries are in a few places, as we talk about PSTN connectivity, we can certainly start with, all right, how are our users doing from their Teams client saying to the service or to the SBC? We also, again, talked about VPN a couple times now as well, and one more time here with the estimated VPN usage. Now, in the building file, right, there was that VPN column that allowed us to mark a subnet as explicitly VPN. So there's a different page called the mapped VPN that shows that. We're not looking at that one, we're looking at the estimated VPN here. So what is estimated VPN? There's a couple of heuristics. You can see it's described at the top there that we use to estimate whether a client may be on VPN, right? It's not a surefire thing, but it is pretty reliable to find when users are on a VPN, whether it's your corporate one or maybe one that they're just using on their own. Now we don't want this to be the case, right? As you talked about, it's best to split Teams media from VPN or otherwise bypass it from VPN tunnel. So even outside of your map VPN subnets, the estimated VPN page here lets us pull out users who we think may be using VPN, where they are. Again, in the bottom left, you'll see users, if you have one of those roles that has end user identifiable information available to them. You'll see who the specific users are, right, who are, we think, using VPN, and then what are the stats associated with them, right? If you're trying to make an argument about why it's important to bypass VPN, this page and the map VPN page are usually really good fodder for that. Like, okay, listen, right? If you don't have VPN, it's looking pretty green. If you do have VPN, or we think you do, suddenly your statistics aren't looking as good. Peter, do you have anything to add there?
So I was going to say, I think I talked too long. So
all right,
I wanted to make sure that we left a little bit of time for Q&A, but I wanted to make sure, because you did have a lot of like the UDP, TCP slide.
Let's keep going. Yeah.
And
so
the calling and meeting troubleshooting, like a few more of the slides still to show, but
yeah, we'll go real quick through here, right? We'll go back to UDP. So we talked about this, right? UDP's obviously preferred. We'll be able to pull out where there's usage of TCP, who those users are, where they're coming from. So good to find pockets of maybe where there's still proxy, maybe in a local site. Clients, this can be absolutely helpful for finding pockets again of where maybe users haven't been getting auto updates to their Teams client, or maybe VDI clients that are wildly out of date. I want to address those, and the Clients tab can help us do that. The Client tab here. The other way we can use Power BI here, right, is pulling out those meeting specific details, right? So if you drill through into specific meetings, you can actually start to see kind of like the data we saw in the Teams Admin Center with call analytics, right? That call history view, but everybody all at once, right? Who are my users who are joining? When do they join? Did they have failures or poor marked streams during that call? What were the network stats in those streams? Audio, video-based screen sharing, all of them. Specifically, like the max packet loss can be really insightful for, oh, maybe on average things were good, but there were spikes of packet loss, right? We need to find out what was happening there. Those are the things people on the call notice. We don't necessarily mark it as poor based on the average for the service. Other connectivity, like how, what network they're connected to, Wi-Fi or wired, and what the signal strength was, all the way back to what was their client, the client version, what devices were they using. So all of that is surfaced here inside of the meeting health details. It's a great companion to the Teams Admin Center for a first pass view. So thank you, Peter, for the time check. But just a couple more things to touch on real quick. This is all historical data, right? What has happened with your client? If we need to do point in time tests, maybe we don't have Teams clients yet, so we have a couple options. We have the command line network assessment tool, allows us to do synthetic tests kind of on a schedule potentially, as well as the connectivity page from M365 includes these same synthetic Teams tests, but also gives other very important M365 information. So with that, we'll wrap it up here with some links, some resources. We should take these away. I think a lot of these have already been posted in the chat, and check them out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We're going to quickly do a little plug-in for our Fast Track team. Deepika Malhotra from our Fast Track team is here with us today, and we'll do a quick end of session wrap just to make sure that we have some calls to action for the team. And we should be right in time to get you all out of here for your lunch breaks. I'm just gonna, represent my screen here. Bear with me. Oops. There we go. To the end.
Masan, you can use the thumbnails too, bottom right, bottom left corner.
Oh, yes. Thank you. A lot easier than clicking through slide by slide, right? Perfect. Deepika, handing it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. I am Deepika Malhotra. I am part of the Microsoft Fast Track team. I am based out of Toronto, and I have a team of architects that support our Canadian customers coast to coast. For Fast Track, those of you who are hearing this for the first time, Fast Track is a benefit that's available to our customers with 150 or more paid licenses of Microsoft 365. And so as long as you have those licenses, whether it's E3 or E5, you are eligible to this benefit. And the intention of the benefit is to ease onboarding for our customers. We've been here for, as you can see on the slide, which I'm not going to drain, since 2013. We started off with onboarding, but today we are there to drive and support our customer success unit, our customer solution architects with the onboarding of our service. In terms of methodology, we're not a consulting organization, so we do not provide, hands-on project management and those types of activities. But in terms of enablement of any service under Microsoft 365, and you can see the workloads, we can provide that guidance, that remote guidance to our customers to enable it themselves, or in partnership of any resources from Microsoft or any of our partners. In terms of our, session today, just wanted to share briefly the different stages or the methodology that we use in terms of enabling our customers. We do take a structured approach. So, if you're getting started here, we would help with assessment. we would help with identifying how you can remediate your environment and then configure and enable your infrastructure to support these Microsoft services. We also do data migration for some of our other Microsoft 365 services like Exchange Online, as well as OneDrive for Business. And then once the service is enabled, we would hand it over to our partner organizations like Customer Success Unit or any other external party or the customer themselves to drive adoption of that. So with that, I know we're tight on time and we wanted to leave some space for questions. All the information is available on the site. If you go to Fast Track site, and I will put a link here. It's fasttrack.microsoft.com. There's also a form there to request the service. And if you're interested in getting any more information, any of the Microsoft employees can provide that information as well. So reach out. It's a benefit that's available to you, and definitely avail it for enablement of any of the Microsoft 365 services. With that, Masan, I'll give it back to you. I know you're tight on time, and Q&A is an important part of these sessions. So I'll let you get to those.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Deepika, for going through Fast Track with us. I'm just going to stop the recording.